Managed to break my transducer, my homemade transducer mount last weekend. After bringing it in, this cutting board piece snapped under the pressure of the, I think the tune got a little overheated and the air inside expanded and got a little too tight and snapped at this weak spot right here. So I'm gonna try to repair that and show you guys how I make this transducer mount. Materials that go into this DIY transducer mount, I can show you here that you've got a nylon belt or nylon webbing with a quick release buckle. It's about 48 inches long, at least the length, usable length of the strap is. Then you've got a 1-inch PVC pipe. The hardware that comes with actually comes with the transducer itself. A little bit of a knob here with appropriate washer and nut. A cutting board is what was broken. I'm going to be replacing. And then to mount to the cutting board, there are elevator bolts with the appropriate nuts and washers, and this piece here, which I'll show you, and that is a bracket for mounting partitions in a public bathroom. So you'll see those when you go into a public bathroom. You see those mounted to the wall, and then the partitions between the stalls are mounted to these brackets. So I use one of those brackets to do this. The detail of mounting the transducer itself to the 1-inch pipe, and again, this is just using hardware that came with the transducer. This is a Garmin Striker 4, so it came with this transom mount, and by kind of using that hardware and drilling through the 1-inch pipe, you can get the right connection that you need. These are the elevator bolts that are used to secure the bracket to the cutting board. You can see that they have zero clearance on the back side. So that's the side that goes up against the pontoon, and it does not protrude. There is no hex head. There is no carriage bolt head that can put any kind of pressure on the pontoon. Again, these are called elevator bolts, and I just got them from the specialty drawer in my local Ace Hardware. The cutting board itself is supposed to have 2 slots in it, and that allows the nylon belt or the webbing to pass through those 2 slots. And again, I seem to have made a weak point. I think I'll make the next one a little bit wider if I can, and maybe improve it a little bit. Okay, I've removed the hardware from the elevator bolts, and it's just a lock washer and the appropriate size nut. And when I take this off, you can see that the elevator bolts are actually 2 different sizes, and that's because of the profile of this bracket. So you've got a deeper side and a more shallow side. So the 2 elevator bolts are 2 different lengths. So now we'll just try to pop the elevator bolts out so that they can be reused in the new piece of cutting board. And in order to get this strap out of the old cutting board, I'm going to have to undo this clasp and slip it out. And in order to make this easier on me when I go to reassemble it later, I'm going to go ahead and film this part so that I have a reference for getting it back to the way it was properly. It's rather stiff because it's been in a certain position for many, many months, so it doesn't really want to, it's not exactly pliable. So there's that piece of the quick buckle, and then we need to take this off as well. There's that piece. And now we can slide the belt through the old cutting board. When you are into doing DIY, is always save your scraps. So this is a piece of the cutting board that this piece came from, so I do have some scrap available that I can use to make a new one. And you can see here again the break and where it happened. This new one should be, I can make it wider so the stress point will have a little more beef and maybe not crack as easily. So I think I'm just going to line it up like this and trace out the general outline, especially the hole where the holes go, so that the bracket can go on correctly, and then the slots for the belt. In my opinion, doing this kind of work, the best tool for the job is this Sharpie Ultra Fine Point pen. Okay, the drilling of the holes is complete. I used a 1/4 inch bit for the 2 holes for the bracket, and then a slightly smaller bit just to do the ends of the slots. And now I use maybe a utility knife or some sort of saw, maybe a jigsaw. I'll figure out a way to cut those straight lines to connect those holes to make the slots. Okay, this is not an art project. We're not trying to make it look pretty. I just drilled a series of holes along the outline of the slot, and then used the drill, just kind of pushed the drill bit through the cutting board to connect the holes, and then used a utility knife to just kind of clean it up a bit. So it's very rough. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to look pretty. We're just trying to have something functional here. Last step is to cut along this last black line right here. And you can see these 3 small holes. Those are just from a previous, I don't know what I was doing, but those aren't going to really get used for anything, and they won't hurt anything by being there. So here's the piece after that final cut. And the last thing to do is to round off these corners, just sand off any kind of edge that's even remotely sharp that would put any kind of abrasion on the side of the tune. We want to keep that vinyl as unharmed as possible. And I think the best tool for that is just a sanding sponge. And here's the cutting board with the rounded corners, rounded edges. Really just tried to smooth off anything that might put any kind of abrasion onto the side of the tune. So we're going to call that good enough and put it back together. And this is where the transducer rides on the side of the pontoon. Let me back up a little bit. You can see the strap just goes around the pontoon, and then the transducer rides off to the side, and it gets just low enough into the water where it can take its readings.